ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Saturday edition of the Paranormal Portal, and we are back and live, and we made it. I just just about really screwed something up in a hurry. It didn't take long, but here we are, and of course it's Saturday night, so I got to welcome my good friend and co-host, Mr. Don Longbeard.
Hello.
How you doing, Don?
Hello. I'm good.
Wow, was that close or what?
It was, yeah. You were like, the
right
skin of the
wire.
teeth. It's like, I can't believe I did that.
I was just telling our guest tonight, look, this is gonna be better this time. We're better now. And then he's like, can I go get a drink of water? I'm like, sure. And then he walks away from the computer, and I hung up on him. God.
Good one, Brent.
It's just my way. It's my zen.
It's your welcome in, buddy.
And it wouldn't be the portal without me screwing something up. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you guys are doing great. Thanks for joining us tonight. We are absolutely thrilled you're here and a part of the Paranormal Portal. It's growing by leaps and bounds, and some incredible episodes under our belt, so we're doing really well, and we've had some amazing guests on, especially lately. I mean, any one of the guests that we've ever had on has been phenomenal, but we've just had some really fantastic shows lately, and it's really showed, and people are really responding real well to what's going on here, and we're looking forward to continuing to expand what it is we do here on the portal. And
what is it we do here on the portal?
Well, other than me disconnecting our guests and having technical difficulties as a way of life, I guess we're learning proper troubleshooting for one thing. We're learning to troubleshoot many different systems on our show, and I think that's always a good thing.
Yeah,
but
that helps. Yeah.
But thank you all for being here. I was just going to look at the numbers and see just how many of you guys are out there tonight.
Woohoo!
I'm hoping a lot.
Let's do it.
Yeah, there's 3,198 of you listening on TFR Live.
Sweet.
iHeart, TuneIn, TalkStream. And we're thrilled you guys are here. Thanks for being a part of it. And, of course, those of you over on YouTube at youtube.com/paranormal portal, you guys are watching us do this simulcast live. So it is nothing short of a party here on the portal.
Yeah, just get to it.
Well, what do you mean, Don? This is it.
Oh, this is it?
I didn't say it was a big party or a good, or even a good party, but it's our party. So
it is our party. That is for sure. But it's our party.
It is. So, but our guest tonight is somebody that's been on the show before, but the last time he was on was such a comedy of errors on my part. And, some things I could control and a lot of things I couldn't. And I felt terrible, but we had a great show anyway. But we finally got him back here tonight to be with us. And without further ado, let me welcome our guest tonight. And that is Mr. Dan Pruett, who is a paranormal investigator, incredibly knowledgeable guy, and just a fantastic person all around. Thanks for being here again, Dan.
Hey, thanks for having me back, guys. Good to be here.
Well, cool. So how's life in your world?
Oh, man, it's never a dull moment, that's for sure. I'm just wrapping up 2 weeks of vacation, and like I was saying earlier, I'm just now getting to the point that I have to go back to work on Monday. I'm getting to the point that I'm completely relaxed and chill, and just in time to go back to work. So.
Yes, doesn't that tell you a lot about your job, though? I mean, the amount of stress you're under. It takes 2 weeks to decompress, just enough time to get back to it. So, well, that's...
Yeah, my usual policy is take at least 2 weeks, 3 to 4 if possible, so you have at least 1 week to stop thinking about work. Yeah. No, it was a good time.
Isn't that the way it works, though, too? Is like, okay, so if you have 2 weeks of vacation, the first week you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm not at work. This is so great. And you keep thinking about being at work, but you're not there. And then the next week, you're like, oh my God, it's going to end pretty soon. I got to go back to work.
I got to get back to work. It sucks.
You never quite hit that stride in the middle where it's like, hey, I'm just on vacation.
Chill.
Yeah. So I know what you mean. I struggle with that myself, but we're absolutely thrilled you're here. And I really enjoyed the show last time with the amount of information you brought to the table. And the detail, and I just am really excited to get myself out there and doing more investigating. But since last time you were on the show, have you got any more investigation Have you done any more investigating?
Yeah, a few here and there. Nothing major. I helped Spooked in Seattle do their once a month they do a investigation, a public ghost hunt, and this one was at on board the USS Turner Joy over in Bremerton. It's a retired Vietnam era destroyer. And with some pretty interesting history. I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was the first ship to take fire in the Vietnam conflict.
Oh wow!
And it was had some couple really terrible things happen, and it never disappoints. If you're ever over on this side of the state, and you can get over to Bremerton, if you're coming to Seattle, you can just hop on the Bremerton ferry. And once you get onto the ferry terminal over at Bremerton, it's literally just a walk, just a 5-minute walk to the USS Turner Joy. The team that keeps it put together and allows Spooked in Seattle and A Ghost access, they're phenomenal, and they're really working hard to preserve the history and to tell the stories of the sailors that served there. And it's really interesting. Yeah, there was a couple times with deck below us, there was just myself and June Nixon, who's with A Ghost. We heard, just seemed like from one end of the boat to the other, just someone running. Oh, wow. And it was unmistakable running. Yeah, I mean, you can't run fast enough to go check on it, because it's, you know how Navy ships are tightly packed, and go running too fast, you're going to take a header onto something. But the guests, there were 3 guests that night, and they haven't gotten back in touch with us to see, because they brought some of their own gear. They haven't got back in touch with us to tell us that they've got anything. And we tried to be mindful of just kind of letting them investigate and, not trying to conduct our own investigation. So, yeah, it was pretty interesting.
That is really cool, and I gotta imagine that those old ships, I gotta imagine they're kind of a nightmare to investigate, though, wouldn't they be, or aren't they? Because of with things like when you're considering EMF and things like that, when you're in a big Faraday cage of almost, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's a giant Faraday cage. First off, second, the ship has a tendency to be completely unshielded with some electrical. And I've noticed this I've been lucky enough to investigate several, seagoing vessels, and a lot of unshielded electrical. EMF meters are, I've had 175 milligauss sustained. Wow. For standing in one spot, and it's if you stand there for too long, you get sick to your stomach, and you have to really back off. So, and on top of it, things reverberate. So any little noise, investigating a ship is unlike investigating anything else. It's really its own animal.
Oh, I can't imagine, and I imagine even just running cable and all of the nightmares, with just the logistics of it must be just a nightmare. And now you said that you guys didn't really actively investigate on this time. You were just more as guides and facilitators for that other team to come and investigate. Is that tough for a team to get an investigation like that? Because I imagine investigating on an old retired warship has got to require some pretty specific permissions, or is it not as hard as I'm thinking?
No, Ross and June from the Advanced Ghost Hunters of Seattle, Tacoma, they have a really good relationship, and I'm sure if a team wanted to go in and do their own investigation, I don't know that they'd have carte blanche straight away. So Ross has been kind enough to foster those relationships and provide the access to as many people as possible, and educate along the way, which is something we like to do.
Now that brings up a pretty, I think, a good point. And as far as investigating 101, and I know a lot of people are real eager to find places and, you know, abandoned places and things like that, and just go investigate, and probably don't bother getting the permissions that they should be getting. In other words, they're not really supposed to be in there, but they go in there anyway. I mean, I guess that would be rule number one, ladies and gentlemen. If you're going to investigate anywhere, make sure you're supposed to be there. And I think that as I'm saying that, it's not just for legal reasons that you don't want to be trespassing. You don't want to, be looking at charges being filed against you, but even for safety reasons, because when investigating, and Dan, you would be the perfect person to bounce this off of, how safe are the environments that you investigate in, as far as like some of the old decommissioned buildings and abandoned buildings and stuff? I mean, would you consider them safe at all?
At times, I did a lot of foundation and framing in a previous life, so I can generally look at something and know if it's structurally sound or not. And I admittedly have been in structures that I probably wouldn't go in again. I've never been in a structure without express permission. Just to kind of emphasize that point for everyone listening, if it may seem tempting, and it's definitely, once you have some investigation under your belt and you've witnessed some activity that you can't explain, there's definitely the allure when you may not have express permission to go on to a premise. But trust me, it wouldn't be worth being arrested, having that on your trespassing on your record, because if you were going to be considered for anything else, because some owners will do background checks, you wouldn't want that showing up, because that'd be pretty much a no for the rest of your paranormal career,
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I think. And so, I mean, as a public service announcement, make sure you get permission, because, in the worst case scenario, they need to know where to go find the body.
They need to know where to go find the body, and on top of everything, there's a certain amount of credibility, and I'm on the road so much by myself. I kind of I'm not exactly the poster child for always taking someone with you when you go investigating, but documenting the investigation for credibility purposes, especially if you're looking to, share your evidence and you want to explain to someone else this is real. You want your evidence to stand up, and if you've got someone else and you're both documenting each other as you're documenting the investigation and the area, then you're better off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, and you're not killing the rest of your paranormal career either, because like you said, Dan, you don't want that on there, because you'll never get another gig of that. Nope. So yeah,
that's true.
So
now, last time you were on the show, we were able to get into a little bit of getting started, but could you take a minute and recap? Let's say somebody's interested in becoming, I don't know if I can say investigator, but ghost hunting or paranormal investigating, whichever is the two. What are, if you had 3 pieces of equipment that you could only bring 3, what would those 3 pieces of equipment be?
So the 3 pieces of equipment, I think that you have to master before you can even think about stepping into anything super geeky and high tech. A good voice recorder, a good camera, and a pen and a piece of paper, or pencil and piece of paper. With those, someone can spend years and years and years learning how to take proper photographs. And I think we've all seen just how complicated, especially digital SLR cameras can be. Yeah. So I think learning how to take proper photographs, learning about exposure and f-stop and everything in the camera to get a good image, that to me is a good introduction to the physics you need to keep in mind when you're investigating the paranormal. Same thing goes for voice recorder. I don't recommend someone going out and spending $1,000 to find a Panasonic DR60, 'cause at the end of the day, someone with a real connection to the other side can use just about any type of voice recorder and get quality EVPs. Some people have that connection, some people don't. Absolutely positive, in my opinion, that it can be developed. So learning how to take proper photographs, learning how to take proper EVPs, or proper audio, and then a pen and a piece of paper, or pencil and a piece of paper, just to document where you are, what time you feel a certain thing. These are, and I've got to give credit to Ross and June at AGOS, because that's what they taught me, and I just over and over and over can't stress those three enough, because they were dead on with them.
Absolutely. And that's very, I even though I remember you being on the show and mentioning those same things, I still forgot about pencil and paper. I mean, right. Because you think about, I need EMF, I need EVP, I need structured light, I need infrared, I need ultraviolet, and the shopping list gets so big, but
it does.
It really just boils down to procedure and technique. And with those couple of items, and it doesn't even have to be an IR camera, right? I mean, some people have gotten amazing evidence with just a point and click regular camera. They've captured some really amazing things.
Yeah, absolutely. Visual evidence, that's the holy grail, I think is the term that's most often used. Visual evidence is what everyone wants to see. There's that instant gratification when you can see something. You can take just even a point and click with the right light conditions. It just depends, whether you're going to get something or not. Right. Again, I think having that connection is part of it. Your shutter just happens to be open at the right time, to get that one frame. And then low light photography. Of all places, I was vacationing last year with my family, and we were at a resort in Hawaii, and I was looking on their agenda for the day, and they were like, "Oh, we're going to do some nighttime photography classes." And I was like, "Wow, that's really awesome. I think I'll go check that out." By the end of this 45-minute class, this guy was showing us how to tune the exposure and the different settings on the camera to write messages with flashlights, and really long exposure photography, and writing messages with flashlights that you could see, and being able to spoof something that looked like a ghost. So it really got my mind churning on, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this more. It got my mind churning on how light is on an investigation, the physics of light and the electromagnetic spectrum, and it was really the catalyst for some of the work that I've been doing lately, with zero IR and zero infrared, zero ultraviolet on investigations.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a great point as well. And I took photography classes at a college, and I don't quite have a degree in it, but I'm close. And we did a whole segment on trick photography and doing things like you're talking about. One of the things is having a long exposure. We used to do the one where you're standing there, and and you can make it appear that you're holding your own head through a long exposure. You just hold the shutter open, and you do this, and you block out your head, and then you duck down to about the right level. And it takes a lot of trial and error, but with several shots, it can look like you're standing there holding your own head. So, and we did several like that. And so you're right. Working with longer exposures and low light is really tricky, and therefore a thing like a tripod is an absolute must, because it's absolutely physically impossible to hold yourself still enough to take a crisp photo with just your arms and body. And you got to either use a flat surface or some kind of fixed surface. Excuse me, I got to remember to breathe when I'm talking. But you have to use a fixed surface in order to hold that frame steady. Otherwise, you will get anomalies, and it'd be like, oh, look at the energy movement. Well, no, it's just you moved, and there was a long exposure. So that's absolutely correct. I couldn't agree with you more. Not that I disagree with you ever, but
Right.
because you are the learned individual as far as investigating is concerned, and I really respect what you're talking about, because it all does get back down to the basics. And of course, our modern culture and modern entertainment, popular entertainment, sensationalizes so much of this, but it just really breaks down to, great technique and good records and knowing your subject matter. So I can't agree more with that. And so let's say with an investigation with a normal camera, would you recommend using flash or not, or how would you do that? Would you go with long exposures or just do flash photography in a darkened room?
It depends on, it kind of goes back to the investigation. If you're going into a place where someone has said, I saw a man walk from this side of the room to that side of the room, and it was, at 1 a.m., and I saw it 4 times. And, if you're trying to follow someone's claim, I think you would not want to introduce any more contamination into an environment if you're trying to document or validate somebody else's experience. Mm-hmm. If you were just going through and taking shots, documenting the area, because let's kind of break out, taking pictures on an investigation to 2 different things. 1, trying to capture activity, and 2, documenting the environment in the area. So if you're trying to document the environment, by all means, you're using a flash so you can see if, this magazine that I found in the middle of the room, was it there earlier when we were documenting the environment? Mm-hmm. Those kinds of shots versus I'm trying to take a picture of the man that was walking from one side of the room to the other. For the latter, I would say if there was someone was taking pictures with a flash and they saw the man, definitely take pictures with the flash. If someone was sitting there with one lamp on and they saw a man walk from one side of the room to the other, I say that's, you leave the lamp on and you don't change the environment. Mm-hmm. I think I'm rambling a little bit now.
No, not at all. In fact, what you're saying is that's exactly right, and I love hearing all that in-depth thought on that, because it's a field that's polluted with a lot of pop culture and a lot of bad information, I think. And so I think when you're going through it like this and as granular as that is, I think it's perfect. So please don't ever think you're rambling. It's great.
Oh, good. I think what it comes down to, and I've had someone ask me this several years back, when I was really just getting my feet wet, getting my feet soaked even. Someone said, why are you doing this? Are you trying to prove something to yourself, or are you trying to prove something to someone else? Mm-hmm. What's your motivation for investigating? And really, it comes back to I want to validate my own experiences, because I've had experiences of things that I can't explain, and I have to know, because that's just the kind of person that I am. Mm-hmm. So I think if I'm trying to prove something to myself, you go in with a little bit of a different protocol. If you're trying to help somebody understand something or get evidence so they think they're not crazy, or help validate that they're not going insane, I think there's different protocol for that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very, very true, and that's great. We're about a minute and a half out of our first break, ladies and gentlemen. It just goes that quick here on the portal. But we will be getting into this and so much more. It's phenomenal to rebuild the whole idea around investigating. And last time Dan was on, we talked about the difference between ghost hunting and investigating, and they really are. While they're very similar, and Dan brought this to the table, and I'd never really thought about it. I use the terms very interchangeable, but a ghost hunting is like when you're just looking to see a ghost. You want to experience a ghost. But an investigator will record the details of the room, record the atmospherics, record so many other things, and take a more scientific and structured approach to it in order to validate a paranormal activity or action. So it is quite a bit different, and I think it's good to differentiate between the two of those, because I can't be alone. I mean, I can't be the only person that thinks that, ghost hunting and paranormal investigating. I always did. I always just interchanged them, but it's nice to have that distinction. And of course, it does change the approach, and it does change the manner in which you investigate. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our first break, and we will be back in just a couple minutes here for more of the Paranormal Portal. Don't go away. gentlemen, welcome back to the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas, and as it's Saturday night, as usual, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Mr. Don Longbeard. Hello, Don.
Hi.
Hi. Okay. And we are underway tonight with a fantastic episode, welcoming our special guest, and I'm dubbing him the official paranormal investigator for the Paranormal Portal, Mr. Dan Pruett. Welcome back, Mr. Pruett.
Hey. Thank you so much.
Now, over break, and ladies and gentlemen, I just want to let you know, of course, it's Saturday night. The call-in number will work. I just got to remember to actually look at it once in a while, because I end up getting lost in the conversation, and it's like, oh, wait, there's a call been on hold for about half an hour. I've done that actual thing. But if you'd like to call in, please do. The call-in number is 213-233-3998. If you have any questions for Dan that you would like answered specific to his field of expertise, that would be great. We would love to hear from you. And if you're calling from the UK, if you guys are awake over there yet, I'm not sure, but the call-in number for the UK is 44203-393-2871. Again, 44203-393-2871. So feel free to reach out and take this opportunity to talk to a pro.
A pro?
A pro. Woohoo! That's you, Dan.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Just to clear that up in case there was any question. But now, before we go any further, over the break, Don reminded me of a question that I wanted to make sure to ask as we were going through this broadcast tonight, because what it is it has to do with specifically the ghost box. And I think it's a pretty cool piece of equipment, but what I'm noticing lately is I'm watching several different people using them on YouTube. I'm noticing that they seem to have the cycle rate extraordinarily slow. Like, to me, it's and I don't know if this is just my prejudice or just because this to me makes more sense, but you hear like a partial sentence on every one of those stops, because they're going through the spectrum or the dial. And is that what cycling would you recommend for something like the spirit box, where you're cycling? And ladies and gentlemen, what that is a piece of equipment that rapidly scans through an entire FM band or AM. I'm not sure which one it does now. Actually, I think it's FM, but it scans through the entire band from the low to the high. Like if you picture a radio dial on the older radios, and they have the dial that goes from 90 or 89 to whatever, 105, and it'll scan and through that and in intervals of several stations, usually per second. But now what I've seen, Dan, is these videos of people using it, but they're doing it extraordinarily slow. So it's like, I mean, it's these very slow intervals. And do you have an opinion on how fast that should be?
I don't, admittedly, I don't investigate with spirit boxes as much as some. It's definitely an area, it's intriguing. Mm-hmm. And it's a type of, ITC is definitely, and that's instrumental transcommunication, is definitely an interesting area. Off the top of my head, if I were going to depend on one consistently, I would probably find a way to, when I have I guess I should say this, when I have used them, I will let the whole band sweep several times just so I can get a feel for what's where. I'm weird and make, a lot of mental notes like that. And then I would, I do have one, and the first thing I like to do when I use it is put it inside a Faraday bag to try and get all of the external airwaves out. Surprisingly enough, I've had blips of voices come through while it's been in a Faraday. That to me is a little more interesting. Mm-hmm. I've also used in kind of a Huff style portal setup, used a noise reducer. I'm trying to remember the exact name of the pedal that's used, but you basically run the ghost box out in through a noise suppressor and through some additional reverb. And you can get to a point where you cut the sweep noise out, and you cut any modulated voice out. So when something does come through, it's way more pronounced. And anyone that's worked with the spirit boxes before, you tend to know when you get something that shouldn't be there, because it doesn't sound like the rest of something that would typically be modulated, and it seems to ride above that. If that's a poor way of explaining it, but if I were going to use one consistently, it would depend on, one, if I had access to a method of putting a Faraday around it, and two, if it were picking up a lot, if I couldn't silence it with Faraday, if you will, and if it were picking up a lot, I would go very high sweeps. And I would probably stay high sweeps. Definitely experiment, but pareidolia is definitely going to take over when you're doing slow sweep rates. Because you've got point up or down from a specific channel where you're going to get something tuning in. So you could have a 3 sweeps in a row where you get one sentence from one station, and if it's Sunday at the Raceway, it might be a little more obvious, but
No, that's great, and I appreciate that, because it's not a piece of equipment I'm overly familiar with. I've never used one personally, but just seeing that discrepancy to me was like, well, exactly what you're saying, and I agree wholeheartedly. It's like if it's that slow and you're allowing that much to bleed through in each channel, then anybody can hear anything they want to at that point. Yeah. And it said, "Oh, he loves me." No, no, it didn't.
He said to Blathe.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So you know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, that's exactly. I'd never heard of the idea of putting it in a Faraday bag, though, but that's interesting. And ladies and gentlemen, what a Faraday cage or a Faraday bag is it's basically and correct me if I'm wrong in my description, Dan, but it's basically a metal mesh or metal cloth with metal weaving through it that should block out all incoming electronic signals.
EMS,
So essentially, you should get nothing. If you put a cell phone in there, it won't ever get a text or a call or anything. It'll just never receive anything because it's blocked out by the Faraday cage or bag. And so that's extraordinarily interesting to me. And at that point, then, I always wondered this is well, I guess it's probably a stupid question, but would the Faraday bag in any way interfere with the spirit's ability to manipulate it as well, being an energetic being?
I've had people pose that same question, and I'm more than happy to say I don't know. I don't know specifically, in a physical sense, what's happening. When a piece of interesting audio comes out of a spirit box, is it something that is modulated within the frequency itself? We don't know. Is it something that's riding on top of the modulation and just using, in like a stochastic resonance type of method of using the white noise to amplify a signal that's, would otherwise be too weak? We don't know if that's what's happening. And I guess, that kind of goes back to why I have one. I've used it occasionally, and I work with some great people out of Kansas City that are doing amazing things with them. And I've been with it just, a couple months ago when I was in Kansas City working with my teammates on Supernatural Inc. We were getting things out of the spirit box that I'm fairly certain, unless they were somehow picking up something in a CB band, these were words and things I won't even repeat that I wouldn't expect to hear over the air.
Wow.
And it was very interesting. And I would love to work with them more. I'm kind of hooked on EVP more than anything. That seems to be my bread and butter.
No, absolutely. But that's very interesting. Now, you did mention Huff Paranormal, and I'm just curious, as a sidebar or side note, is there something going on with that guy? Did he, I've heard claims that he had a demon attachment and had to quit and all kinds of different things. Have you heard anything about that?
I think through social media, I saw that, and I saw this is it. I'm hanging it up. I'm being threatened. My family's being threatened. That didn't happen to me, so I can't say his experience is invalid. He seems to have come back pretty quick, and he still seems to be creating and selling his boxes and making appearances and everything. And I think pareidolia is a powerful thing. And I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, that wasn't probably a fair question to throw at you.
No.
But I don't ever mean to put you on the spot. That's never my
No,
motivation.
not at all.
But it's just something that just occurred to me. Like, well, maybe you've heard something, because I don't really know what the hell's going on with the guy. It was like all of a sudden he was out there and doing these videos, and then all of a sudden he wasn't. And in looking for it, I found all these claims that he had something horrible going on with some demonic attachment and had to quit. And so I'm sorry, that was in poor taste on my part, so forgive me.
Oh, no, not at all. And it could very well be that I believe I've had things follow me home. They tend to go away after a short amount of time. I've had instances where a hotel in Spokane, actually, that I stayed at with my family when we were visiting over there a year or so ago. Every night we were in this hotel, we all had terrible nightmares. My daughter had wet the bed every night we were there, and she has never done it before, and she's never done it after.
Wow.
And so I've had instances where I think less than nice things were present and or sticking around. Some of the claims of the demonic, and I didn't read Huff's specific claims. I hear about them, and even poltergeist, infestations. I read them, and I just think that's insane.
Right,
That is an obscene amount of activity, and like from a physics standpoint, I'm trying to wrap my head around how that power is generated, where it comes from. That conversation can go in a different dimension really quick. But I'm trying to wrap my head around some of this, and it never seems to be documented.
Right. And that's a great line of thought as well. When you look on and looking for evidence that's offered on places like YouTube, you get these, I got a poltergeist in my house, and it's this, an orgy of evidence. It's things flopping open in drawers and all this stuff going on. It's like, my God, this can't possibly be legitimate, because if there's that much going on there, they should have the place wired with with a room full of scientists and meters and all kinds of stuff going on. If that's what's really breaking off
Peter
in
Venkman.
your house, exactly. Peter Venkman. Did you just say Venkman?
Yep.
But it's just like I look at those things and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. There can't possibly be that much happening. It's, and I use that term orgy of evidence because it's just like there's too much going on. So is that what your take on those videos is as well?
Yeah, and I think and I've seen some of them with pots flying off of stoves and doors flying open, and someone with a steady hand on their cell phone taking that video, and just not missing a beat. And
we've said that many times.
And some of the other clips that I've seen, it's like, well, what were you doing recording in the first place? Were you just decided to record your screen door, or was it always happening?
I just love this door.
Yeah. But that said, it's I guess if we're being purely scientific about it, we have to say that there's a reason not a reason. We have to say there's a chance it's not fake. And I think, even with some of the more laughable to me TV shows and personalities in the field, if you will. Mm-hmm. If I'm being purely scientific about it, they could be right, I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. And no one's, at the end of the day, no one's going to, or they shouldn't straight away believe evidence that they didn't collect themselves, or evidence of something they didn't experience themselves. I guess we should all be skeptical first off, but we should all be willing to accept the fact that there's a chance someone's right. There's a chance it's not fake.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of that, though, okay, let's take that as a great example of all of the popular ghost hunting shows that are out there. Which do you feel is closest to the way it should be done? And I realize you're probably going to say none of them are really right, but in terms of watching what they do and how they do it, is there any one show that you think seems more credible than others?
No, I guess I can't really say that I think one is more credible than another, because I've seen suspect evidence come out of shows that very similar methods and measurements and phenomenon that I've experienced. So I even on some of the more notorious shows, I've seen evidence come out of them where, based on my experience, I'm saying, oh, yeah, they got something legit there. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I find, like a lot of other paranormal investigators, I find myself sometimes yelling at the screen while I'm watching, like, hey, you didn't tag that audio. Hey, stop walking while someone is recording. Mm-hmm.
I love the great one on those shows is they'll all be standing there, and then some disembodied voice will happen, and then they sit there talking about it for 5 minutes instead of shutting up and listening for what else might be coming.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my God, did you hear that? It was like right in my ear. It's like, shut up.
What's the because there's something I always say, and there's one of our people in the chat room that I was talking with him about the other day, and that was investigator versus instigator. Oh, I hit a nerve there. Go ahead.
I've being investigation is you'll find people who will go in and they will be themselves on an investigation, and being themselves is loud, maybe a little brash, maybe a little pushy. And I've also seen people who just go in and they're scared. When the things start happening, they get even more scared. I think there's a happy medium between the two. I think your intention, like a lot of things in, not just with paranormal activity, but with a lot of the other parts of our world, if you will, intention is everything. Mm-hmm. And I've worked with some very level-headed investigators, and I've worked with some investigators that I would probably coach a little bit, maybe even a lot.
That's a good point.
One of our chatters, he said, unfortunately, Zach's a bit too aggressive. So obviously he's talking about that one really...
Zach Bagans.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm. Yeah.
Right. That's kind of... there are other people, let me get to like Facebook or YouTube, that we've watched on Facebook or YouTube, and they create problems for themselves doing these things, poking the bear and not seeming to understand how to take care of, calming the bear back down, shall we say. and people calling out for help, or making it, asking for help on how to deal with things, and so that's where I come up with the instigator part, because I think it's just a bit too much, you don't poke a bear and expect it to just fall right back to sleep, Like, and even like you said, you've come home with an attachment or two every now and then, but it doesn't seem to be that big of a deal for you, because as a matter of fact, we've talked about this before, about how you shake things off or whatever that may be, and if I remember correctly, I believe you said you just pretty much let it do its thing and it goes away,
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so that's just my point. Is we get these people who get out there and they poke and poke and poke and then turn around. Like, another thing is people who go and say, well, we're here to help you, and by the end of the investigation, there's no help for that spirit to be either passed on or get the issue resolved that may be clinging them to this reality, and it just pisses them off for the next person.
Right.
Or the people that live there and have
Yeah.
to stay there.
Yeah.
It's like the investigators get to go home, or the ghost hunters or whatever. But
Right.
that is a good point, that investigating can, and would you agree with this, that it can really amplify activity for a period of time?
Oh, it can definitely amplify the activity. Everything from, I think someone who really gets into paranormal investigation, and even someone who does a lot of ghost hunting, after a while you become more receptive to it. And I think when someone's been doing it for a while, or they've had those experiences and they've, made those connections to the other side, it's not something that you just get the luxury of turning off sometimes.
Right.
And you might go into an environment and, someone who was an a-hole in life is probably going to be an a-hole in death. And we all have at least one person we've met that we just don't jive with them, and that's definitely plausible, and I think prudent to expect going into some investigations that some entities are either not going to talk to you, some are going to gab your ear off, some are going to recognize that you're able to help them, and some are just going to latch on for the ride. Mm-hmm. Some are just going to be absolutely rude. I've had a little bit of everything happen, so yeah.
Awesome.
That is awesome. And so in the times, again, to recap, for people that are listening, we got about 2.5 minutes before the break. But when those things did follow you home, and as Don had alluded to, you just kind of let them do their thing. Is there anything in particular that you did do in order to expedite their visit and make it over? Or did you just kind of hang out and you know what I mean? Is it just a matter of energy being expended and then they return to where they're going, or how does it...
I think it's just a matter of it will run its course. I have a pretty strict don't investigate in my own home policy. So when something's come home with me, it's been, footsteps or voices, and I live in a relatively small apartment with my family. My wife has occasionally noticed something. She tends to write it off. I have noticed things, especially late at night. I tend to be a night owl, so I've heard flat out footsteps in the kitchen that's 10 feet away from me, and there's nothing over there. Wow. I've heard voices that were in the apartment with me that weren't there, and only a very, very small handful of times have I tried to make that communication back, just because I believe when you when you light up a voice recorder and you're going with that intent of communication, you're inherently opening yourself up. Mm-hmm. I try not to open myself up in my own home, because what if I pick up a voice recorder and I start talking to something, I play it back, and it's just the most god awful threats. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, time.
That's a good point. Well, we're about to go to our second break, our hour break already. Wow.
Yeah, that's nice.
It
flies. It goes quick, doesn't it?
It really does. So, ladies and gentlemen, don't go away. We'll be back to continue the discussion with Mr. Dan Pruett here on the Paranormal Portal. We'll be right back.
Play their games. Everybody loves to place their bets. They don't understand the price I paid. They don't care to comprehend. Trace their lines upon my body, dripping scars across my heart. Raging anger pours inside me as their lies keep falling apart. With my silence, I am not a stupid boy. No more breaking me with kindness, just you dance upon my joy. Leading me with empty promise, you're just another fucking mess. Taking off the slice of my sanity, just make sure that you're well fed.
Frequency Radio. This looks extraordinarily bad.
They linger in a perpetual dream state, a nightmare from which they cannot wake. I can't see you, Mommy. Where are you? I've never sensed anything like it. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. They're attracted to the one thing about her that is different from themselves. Her life force. It is very strong. It gives off its own illumination. It is a light that implies life and memory of love and home and earthly pleasures. Something they desperately desire, but can't have anymore. Right now, she's the closest thing to that.
Poltergeists are usually associated with an individual. Hauntings seem to be connected with an area. A house, usually.
Poltergeist disturbances are of fairly short duration, perhaps a couple of months. Hauntings can go on for years.
Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen, hour number 2 of the Paranormal Portal tonight. We hope you're enjoying the ride. I know I am. I'm learning a little bit every time Dan comes on. Usually a lot, actually. But, of course, welcome back, Mr. Don.
Hola.
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 And welcome back, Mr. Dan Pruett, our special guest tonight, who is a paranormal investigator and man who knows his stuff. So, hope
Thank you.
Otherwise, you might not be here, is all I'm saying.
If you just wasted time with us.
Yeah, you'd just be like one of us then. So it's a good thing you come with a full tool belt at your disposal. Yeah. But welcome back, and ladies and gentlemen, the call-in board is open. Again, the call-in number is 213-233-3998. And don't be shy. I don't have radio jitters or anything, but we do have a call on the board right now, so let's get to that call and see what's going on.
There we go.
Miss Diane, you're on the air.
Oh, hey, Dee.
Hi, it's one of your favorite troublemakers. Okay, well, it's so nice to see you, Dan.
Hi.
I'm a shamanic person, so, and go to a spiritualist church, so we deal with spirits all the time, but I'm one of the ones that also deals with the not-so-nice ones as well. So, I don't know. I think I would like to hear... Do you have sensitivity yourself, or must you always use electronic means or technological means?
No, I definitely have got to the point to where I feel it. I usually get affected in my stomach, and there will be just a little shift. I don't know how else to explain it, except there's I don't know if anyone knows, or maybe you know what I'm talking about when I say that moment where you're about to pass out, and you just kind of shift out and back in for a second. That's usually my red light indicator that something's around, and going with that, I'll start lighting up, various electronic means of communication. But I think it's also important not to jump straight to tech, and to let yourself experience the investigation and experience the activity. I think that's just as important.
Nice.
I think it is important. I think there's more than one component to all of these things. And I think we have... I'm very glad you're allowing yourself to have your natural detectors, and that's a good sign to me, because I think that's going to be important as we go on to... not everybody has the tech. As the veil thins, we're going to be seeing a lot more. I just did a video about that. We're going to actually have people probably freaking out pretty good pretty soon, because 2018 is going to be when people are really going to start seeing things. So we're going to need people like you, though, to actually give us some kind of proof, some kind of, evidence to show people that you're not crazy. you just don't understand what you're experiencing yet because you've been told a bunch of balhooey. Let's face it, we've all been told a bunch of BS, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we need help. We're waking up this year. So
yeah, I agree
I'd
with
like
you.
to hear.
Go ahead.
I'd like to hear your coolest experience, and then somebody in the audience wants to hear you talk about the different spirit types.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, you bet. So I've had several. I think probably if I had to say the coolest experience I've had, I have an infatuation with Bobby Mackey's Music World in Wilder, Kentucky. I go there every chance I get. It's a place that means a lot to me for several reasons. Probably the biggest reason being I saw my first and to this date only apparition with my own eyes there, and that's hands down my coolest experience. Is kind of just out of the corner of my eye, just catching something moving and looking up in time to see the top half of a man just glide away from me, and just kind of sit there in the moment, a little slack-jawed at first, and trying to collect myself. And I think that was cool, but what was even cooler was there's a resident paranormal team at Bobby Mackey's, and there were two ladies with me, and they could tell something had happened, and about the only words I could muster were "old man," and they said, "Oh, the shuffler, yeah, well, a few people have seen him."
Yep.
And he's one of the resident spirits there, so that's probably my coolest one. And then the types of spirits. Also at Bobby Mackey's, I even going on 4 years later, the jury's still out within myself on. I don't know if I was pushed or if my body was just telling me to get out. But it was going into the men's room with an IR camera, and I got about 3 steps in, and I felt like my guts were just turning inside out. Cramps and flutters in my stomach, there's really nothing like it. And I was on my butt, and I was scrambling to get out of there, and I just had this feeling of utter dread. And it took about 2 years before I would go back into that bathroom. And
I know that feeling real well.
the feeling I got was,
and you were right to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want me in your space. I should probably get out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I worked. I grew up with all kinds of stuff. I mean, I grew up in a haunted house. I worked in a haunted theater.
Wow.
And here in Ohio, we have our own volume of Weird America. So we have even haunted valleys. And I mean, I lived very near a haunted area. Haunted areas are just all over the place here. Let's put it that way. But, some of them are actually nice. I mean, the ones at the Civic Theater were great. When I was working there, they were kind of like family, but somebody came along and cleared them out, which was kind of sad in a way because we were all kinds of used to them, They weren't harmful. So, and I don't clear, things that aren't harmful.
Right.
And I don't feel it's really, my responsibility to do that but the harmful stuff, I mean, sometimes there are things that can hurt people and can hurt you, and some people just walk into things very obliviously and they think they're going to have fun. Oh, this is going to be fun. And it's like, sometimes it's really very not fun. And then sometimes you need somebody like me to help you with that. But, I would say if anybody gets that feeling, please do. I'm not telling you to fear, because fear isn't good.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is definitely not something you want when you're doing anything like this. But on the other hand, if you get a feeling like that, you should probably leave, because there are things that can affect you very negatively, your energy, and you can walk home and feel like you've been beat up. You know?
Yeah, I think I've never walked away from an investigation where I didn't, first off, need to get about 1,000 calories in me, and two, absolutely need to sleep in the next day, because I know that it definitely wipes me out, and especially the more tense investigations. I think there's been times I've been in a location and been just absolutely positive there's nothing going on here. There's no creeping darkness. There's no footsteps. I'm sure I'm not going to get any EVPs. And then I go back only to get some just extraordinary, electronic voice phenomenon. And then there's been times I've been on investigations and it's just been very lighthearted and very happy and active at the same time. And but the investigations where it's a little more tense and you're maybe dealing with an entity that is in a little more pain, they definitely take it out of you.
Oh, yeah. There are some things that'll latch right on and try to suck the energy out of you because they have run out. There are things like that.
Absolutely.
And they see your light, and it's true, they do see you as kind of a light. And so you kind of have to be careful. I'm just saying, that all you people, you are interested in this is great, and I'm really glad to see that. I'm just, putting a little word in there that's of caution. If you feel that you're, let's see, over your head a little bit, there is no shame in backing out of a situation. Oh, yeah. And, reconnoitering, getting yourself back together before you ever try again. And I would say also that whatever it is that you do believe in, use that. I know it's really a lot about your belief, what is going to help you in this case, I feel. If you have a very strong faith, then that's the thing to use. But from, my shamanic standpoint, I can tell you that human beings are really very powerful. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Human beings are really very powerful on the spiritual level. If you just remember that you are, and do not allow the situation to take you over, and don't, stir up a hornet's nest when it's not necessary. That's my parting words. Boy, that was a good story. I want to hear more. And thank you so much, Dan.
Thanks, Diane. Good to talk to you.
It's such a cool, so many cool stories and advice. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for calling, Dee. Awesome. That's fantastic. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to mention, she brought up, we had that chatter that asked that question about the different types of spirits. Can you touch a little more on that? Can you perceive the difference between the types of spirits that may manifest?
So far, I guess I really just kind of have a very small classifications, something that's intelligent and something that's residual. And I think a lot of paranormal investigators kind of go there. I know people that believe they've had poltergeist and demonic manifestations. Mm-hmm. I've yet to experience those. Okay. I've experienced some pretty intense activity and some pretty intense intelligent activity. But as far as, is it a fairy? Is it an elemental? Is it, a demon or something like that? I've not experienced that. Okay. and I hope I get to. I guess what I'm trying to say is I definitely. I know there are people that lean very heavily on those classifications, and I don't doubt them. I just don't have probably the type of experience. To me, it's an entity.
Right.
And that's a good point. I mean, there is no, they don't come up with name tags. It's just activity, and how are you going to know what it is unless you can't know it's a shadow person unless it manifests as a shadow looking person and walks by, and you can't know it's an elemental because it's going to be behaving like any other disgruntled spirit, or I guess I really respect what you're saying, Dan, because it's like, how can you know? They don't come with labels. So when you have activity, you have activity, and is it responding intelligently, or does it just seem to be on a loop residual?
I think about the other thing you can do, and something I'm a firm believer in, is collecting the data that corresponds with the manifestation. The humidity, the temperature, the ambient light, all these things. I've even lately been I carry around a Geiger counter in my hoodie pocket.
Wow.
Just on the off chance that, hey, all of a sudden, the Geiger counter goes off. Well, now you've got some physics to attach to, some activity that might be coming. So I think the closest that I can get right now to even having a system of classifying entities or classifying activity is kind of identifying and maybe classifying and documenting the physical phenomenon that comes with them.
Oh yeah. I'd love to see your toy box.
No doubt.
That's just awesome.
No doubt.
Now, before the show, and this was something that we brought up on the last show, is that you had talked about your EVPs and stuff, and ladies and gentlemen, Dan has sent me some clips that we can certainly go over here tonight on the show. I don't know if there's any order to the way I have them pulled up here, but let me just look quick. There's the Starlight Cam test, but that's not going to do the people much good on TFR, iHeart, TuneIn, or TalkStream. But the EVPs, I think, are really impressive, and I would like to go through those. Let's see, Now, you have had as you mentioned, the pleasure of investigating Bobby Mackey's. Have you been to any of the asylums that are well known, like Trans-Allegheny or any of those?
No, I actually I keep since I travel a lot for my day job. I want to get over to the East Coast to do more, to get into places like Hinsdale House and Trans-Allegheny and some of the more notorious, if you will, locations. Gettysburg is about as far as I've gotten in that neck of the woods. So I'm looking forward to getting into them.
Oh, okay, cool. And then these are the Harmon houses? Is that the Gettysburg?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Harmon House. So Gettysburg Paranormal has several, kind of packages for people that want to come in and have the ghost hunter experience. And I was working in Harrisburg a couple years ago, and since the battleground, Gettysburg's not open, after dusk. I looked up some of the local paranormal teams, like I do every time I'm on the road, and tried to get in touch. Picked up their extreme ghost hunt, and we went to a couple different locations. The Harmon House was the first one. They built it. And if you want to read, if anyone wants to read more of the story, redeyesanddeadbatteries.com is my blog, and it's a poorly outdated blog. I promise I'll get it updated one of these days. But I have kind of a more comprehensive write-up of the Harmon House. They bill it as the Harmon Murder House on their brochures, if you will. I don't believe it to be that. A lady was shot there in the 80s. She didn't die in the house, but it's pretty obvious she's still hanging around. And she, as I'm sure you'll pick up in the the EVPs. She's a sweetheart, and she's just trying to reach out and talk to people. And I really have a soft spot. It's because of my experiences there and those EVPs and just the general feeling that that's when I switched from wanting to prove something to myself to realizing that there's times I need to help and times I need to listen. And that's one that sticks with me. Debbie's definitely one of those. I'd love to get back and visit her sometime, not to get too far off on a tangent. I should note, anyone that wants to listen to the EVPs, if you've got a set of headphones, I would highly recommend you plug them in. Anytime you're analyzing or listening to EVPs, get some earbuds or some headphones, because we don't have to get into the different theories on EVP right now, but it's very possible for ambient white noise to wash out what you're trying to hear. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me play this one, and we'll see how it comes through. Those of you on TFR, iHeart, TuneIn, and TalkStream, I don't know if it's going to play over that or not. I know I had an issue with this before, but these are all very short. And let me play it a couple of times, Dan. I'll repeat it. I'll play it, repeat it, and let it play again. And then you can explain what was going on when this happened. So here you go, ladies and gentlemen. Have a listen. Okay. And can you explain what was happening in this one?
I didn't hear a single thing.
You didn't hear anything on your connection? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is the one that it says "sweetie," where you. Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't know what it is about this new Skype, but it's made everything so much more convoluted and weird. So there's an EVP in here, ladies and gentlemen, and it's just an ambient room noise, and you can hear this "sweetie" come through. And it's really a great EVP, so I would recommend heading over to Red Eyes and Dead Batteries and check it out. But is that also a photograph of the house that's in this video?
Yeah, that's from the inside. I just to kind of set that one up. There was myself and there was a couple from Australia, along with our guide who's a member of Gettysburg Paranormal. They were 2 floors above me, and I really should have cut that clip longer, because this has been several years. But I was going to walk from the kitchen into the dining room, and as I was walking, I was trying to hit the marker on my voice recorder just so I could know when I switched rooms, and I ended up turning the recorder off, so I had to quickly turn it back on. So that's why there's not a lot of track ahead of that. Okay. So I like to try and clip them a little bit longer so you can get a feel for the noise in the room that's there, and then it kind of helps you identify an EVP more. But that one, I happened to turn my recorder back on real quick, and you can faintly hear the spirit box on loudspeaker in the background. And it was, I can tell you that night, they had it turned up so loud that unless they were shouting, that's all you heard was them. So the fact that you hear that voice over the spirit box was what to me kind of stood out.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very impressive EVP. And I'm sorry it's not broadcasting real well. There's another really great one at the Harmon House as well that I was really floored by, but rather than try to, play it and you not hearing it. Again, how long were you at the Harmon House when you did this investigation? Was this a full night or was it just
an hour, maybe an hour?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was the activity was that profound. Just being there an hour, you were able to pick up EVPs.
Yeah, EVPs. She's very happy to talk to people. I was watching some of the DVR cams that they have set up there, and there were quite a significant amount of dust orbs, which can be sometimes mistaken for paranormal activity. Right. But there was certainly what I believe to be plasma orbs, the real deal, things that are just rod and cone shaped, kind of weird looking things that are not dust. And that was definitely going on there. And they have years and years of documented audio and video in that place. It's really a hot spot. And the entity Debbie, she really likes to connect to people.
That's really cool. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to hit our last break of the night. This night has just flown by. And Dan, it's clear that we're going to have to get you back again and again and again, because as the journey goes and as the discussion continues, I just end up with more and more things that I want to address and talk about. And they're clearly 2 hours just is not enough of a time to do it. So, but ladies and gentlemen, don't go away. We're going to hit our last break here, and then we'll be right back to finish out the night with Mr. Dan Pruett here on the Paranormal Portal. We'll be right back.
Protection from deception.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the last half hour of our show tonight. Apparently, there's a suggestion in the chat room that some episode of the Paranormal Portal should be done completely with puppets. I don't know. Only our listeners, Dan. I'll make it Dan's next appearance. We can have the Dan Pruett puppet and the Brent Thomas puppet and the Don Longbeard puppet. It'll just be either that or ZZ Top. It's
ZZ Top.
Yeah, I love it.
So welcome back to the show, Dan, for the
Thank you.
last leg of our journey tonight. It's just gone so incredibly fast. I tell you, we need fans up in this studio, though. It's getting balmy up in here. Woof,
it's starting to be like a sauna.
Up in here, you know what I'm saying? It's like, we have this one studio room, and it's all, it's shut, and we have an air conditioner in here, but I can't run it because it would just be humming and
blow right into my microphone.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would have to trade seats with you because you're sitting right in front of it. But yeah, it's going to be a hot summer up here. I'm telling you that. So we got to figure out Plan B in a hurry. So tonight, ladies and gentlemen, our special guest is Mr. Dan Pruett, who is a paranormal investigator, and we've been going through a whole evening of talking about technique and equipment and experience. Now, Dan, you had mentioned in the last segment about how you have a very ironclad rule about not investigating in your own house, and I've heard this before. But do you feel, and maybe you alluded to it before and I didn't quite catch it, but do you feel that to investigate in your own house propagates more communication and propagates the phenomena to intensify?
Well, I think you definitely, when you're investigating in your own home, you're opening yourself and your domicile up to whatever may be there. Mm-hmm. Again, I've had things follow me home and hang around for a few days or a week, and it just kind of goes away. I've had one experience. The building we live in, we've been in 3 different apartments. We moved upstairs and downstairs to the bigger units, and finally got the one with the backyard. So when we lived in one of on the other side of the building, I used to sleep on the couch a lot because I would snore pretty bad. And until I got medicine and kind of modern medicine rather to help me out with that, I spent a lot of time on the couch. And the building owner had been having a lot of construction done. As a matter of fact, they tore out every single fresh water line and every single drain out of the building and replaced it. Wow. Did a lot of work. They had the place tore up. And one night I was sleeping on the couch and I woke up with just this terrible feeling, this really terrible dread feeling. And my cats, I've always kept cats. I love them. I guess maybe they have something to do with, anyway. My cats were completely out of character, very weirded out, very afraid of the other side of the room towards the front door. As I kept watching them, I noticed the room was getting darker. I was we live in the city, some of the blinds were open, but the room was getting darker and darker and darker. And then just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, the doorbell rang, and when the doorbell rang, my cats growling and hissing, all 3 of them took off, and I didn't see them for about a day. Wow. And when the doorbell rang, I saw feet under the door because we have a hallway, and there's 2 very heavy doors to get into the hallway. I didn't hear any of that, just the doorbell, and I was petrified. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything, and by the time I was unpetrified and worked up the nerve to go open the door, there was nothing there. Wow. And I had saw feet, and for anything to have left, you couldn't open and close any of those doors without being loud. And yeah, that one.
That's intense.
So I try not to invite things into my home just because I don't know what was going on with that. That was really what got me into wanting to learn more about the paranormal, and definitely why I have that ground rule that you brought up.
Sure. Right. No, and I think it's a great idea. Now, I've also been living with a lot of activity. And it's sporadic, but I have a cat as well, so I know what you mean. How they can just be barometers. He'll just be laying down, and all of a sudden he'll be flying through the house like something's chasing him. It's just this frantic running, and I don't think it's malicious necessarily. I think it's playful is my vibe on it. If you I believe very strongly in intuition that if something bad is there, in your case is a great example. You felt it as much as saw something happening. So there was something very, very clearly there that was hitting you on a primal level, as well as your cats. And in my house, I don't get the feeling of it being malicious or anything sketchy like that, but I do feel like there's something here. And oftentimes I wanted to break out my little recorder and just see if I can get some kind of validation to that in the form of some evidence. But at the same time, I'm like, I got the same feeling. I don't know that I want to crack open this door and encourage it to expand, I guess is the best way to try to encapsulate that verbally, is that, I feel that if I start that level of communication, then am I encouraging more things to happen or more things to come? Right. So, I definitely agree with that, and that's a great rule of thumb. So I appreciate that feedback, and that, great information tonight, ladies and gentlemen. And Dan, before we get to the end of the show, I want to make sure that people know how to find you and get in touch with you. Now, I know you've mentioned it a few times through the stream, but I just want to have you go over that again. How can people find you, get in touch with you if they want to, ask you further questions or whatever?
So Red Eyes and Dead Batteries is my kind of blog. RedEyesandDeadBatteries.com is the official WordPress blog, and then I have Red Eyes and Dead Batteries on Facebook, both of which are just my personal project. Mm-hmm. I'm working on just kind of a homegrown, Have you seen, I think he's actually got a show out now, but Robert Rodriguez's Rebel Without a Crew. Mm-hmm. It's a really good book if you want to get into how he made El Mariachi and kind of doing the one man go out and shoot and do everything. So I'm working on a kind of a documentary since I travel a lot for my day job. I try and meet with teams all over the country and see different locations. So I'm working on that. So Red Eyes and Dead Batteries, the blog, there's no real contact. I think my contact on the blog links back to the Facebook page. But you can get a hold of me through Facebook there. I also work with the Advanced Ghost Hunters of Seattle, Tacoma, as well as Supernatural Inc. out of Kansas City, and both great organizations.
So I love that name, Red Eyes and Dead Batteries, because I don't think anything encapsulates the whole paranormal investigating more than that, because it's now a couple of questions right off the bat. Do you agree with the idea that spirits can drain batteries, and have you witnessed that?
I've witnessed it. I absolutely, if it's being conducted, I think there's a lot of physics about I think at the end of the day, everything that we experience as paranormal activity, it's not supernatural per se. It's just a branch of, it's just physics we don't understand yet, and physics that our feeble minds can't quite grasp. Mm-hmm. I think that's changing.
Sure.
Certainly, as Diane mentioned on the phone, and I've heard people say for several years the veil's thinning, and I believe that. Whether it is some type of physics that we would refer to as supernatural, mm-hmm. or whether it has to do with the poles shifting and the more intense, coronas from the sun and solar flares sending out massive amounts of energy. I think that has something to do with it, but it's definitely happening.
Cool.
And I've witnessed that before.
And I would say that I would agree with it as well. But we do have a call here, so let's get to our caller. And this is area code 808. You're on the air.
Not so Bake.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Just thought I'd throw in my 2 cents here. So
perfect.
That's why I'm calling tonight. By the way, thank you. Great show. Great show tonight. I am absolutely enthralled with this because I feel like I'm kind of like keeping in stride with our guest this evening. By the way, I have a few questions I'd like to ask you, sir, from one paranormal investigator to another. First of all, do you come at this field strictly from a scientific point of view, or do you add in elements of the spiritual? And I'll tell you why I asked that question. Last week we did an investigation, and this has happened several times during an investigation. Not all the time, but it has happened several times in the years that I've done this work. People get affected by it. And when I mean affected by it, there'll be like some kind of spiritual or negative influence, much like what you were talking about earlier, which kind of led me to me connecting to you about that particular experience that you had. So if you have run into these type of situations, like say you go to Bobby Mackey's or someplace like that, and one of the people that you're with, or yourself, if you're going through something like that, how do you deal with a spiritual influence, negative or otherwise, or one that is trying to take over a person? Or do you even believe in that?
I won't say that I don't believe in it, because I absolutely believe that, like I said earlier in the show, if we're being purely scientific about everything, there's a chance everything is happening. There's definitely a chance that everyone, that any given theory is correct. So I have had, I don't know if it was something taking over me. I've had personality shifts on investigations. I've had moments where I just have to stop what I'm doing and walk out and stop. I can't think straight. I've lost time on investigations. I'll just feel like I'm just looking at the wall, and then 30 minutes later, I'm like, what the hell's going on? I've had those. I don't know that I come at it from a spiritual. Again, I think that at the end of the day, this is all physics we don't understand. I don't want to scoff off or kind of dismiss any religious aspects of it, because again, being purely scientific, there's a chance one religion is correct and the other one is not. I don't really come at it from a spiritual place, but I do accept the fact, and I wouldn't do this if I didn't accept the fact that these things can and have latched on, and you get what they give.
I see. And there's another reason why I asked that question, because I really ascribe to the theory that on the spiritual plane, there are many different types of people, much like there is many different types of, spirits as much as there are people. The same type of theory goes for that. Do you believe that there are spirits that are much more, put it to you this way. If a spirit has been on the other side long enough, and if for some reason they have found a way to learn on that side, because I believe that that's possible, that as a matter of fact, it'll be a great place for learning, that there could be higher spirits as well as lower spirits, and that most of the problems are caused by the ones that have not yet truly learned or refused to do that, or they've taken their lessons in a much, much more dark and sinister way. What do you think about that?
I absolutely, I think that's a very plausible, very plausible theory. Again, I can't prove or disprove any of that. I've yet to be in the presence of something that made me fear. I've been in the presence of things that have shook me up momentarily, but I've never been walk away from the field kind of scared by anything. I absolutely think it's all possible. I guess that's kind of a cheap answer to your question. I apologize for that, but
No. And the reason why I asked that, because it's fascinating how you brought up Bobby Mackey's. It seems to be almost like the epicenter for a lot of this negative type hauntings, or one of the most well-known ones. So I was kind of wondering, knowing the story of Bobby Mackey's and everything else as well, just to conclude my questions here, what do you think is going on there? Is there something that is considered to be in the category of very negative and harmful to people? In other words, too, do you think that Bobby Mackey's should be accessible to the public if it does have some kind of negative, connotation about it, or anything like that? What is your opinion about that particular place, or do you believe that there are more than one like that? I think Bobby Mackey's kind of represents everything in that respect, although I myself have run across negative spirits as well. What is your opinion about what is going on there?
At Bobby Mackey's, with the exception of being, like I said earlier, I don't know if I was tossed or thrown down, or whether my body was just telling me to get out. Other than that one experience walking into the men's room there, I've never had anything there that I felt threatened. I've never been scratched. I've done a lot of research on the more prevalent stories. I've found most of them to be fake. What I have found there is a long and bloody history dealing with the Cleveland Syndicate and various mob activities and just general sadness. I think the other thing Bobby Mackey's has going for it is it sits on a fault line. Soil's magnetically active, and it's right next to a northern flowing river. I think those all in and of themselves are very interesting, but when you couple them together, you kind of get an entrance and exit to the spirit superhighway, if you will, and there's definitely a lot of transient things that come and go at Bobby Mackey's. I've witnessed a creeping darkness phenomenon in my apartment, like I was talking about earlier. I've witnessed it at Bobby Mackey's, and I've witnessed it at Mansfield Reformatory. And that's I've heard of it called the creeping darkness phenomenon. But when you're in a pitch black room, it gets darker, it gets darker, it gets darker. Everyone notices it gets darker. And then it gets lighter, then it gets darker and darker, and it usually accompanies footsteps. So there's definitely something going on there. I don't know that it's specifically negative, and really the claims at Mackey's most of them are just that, just claims.
Excellent. I really am happy to be able to speak with someone like you. I guess in closing, I would have to say that with paranormal research, with people like yourself and other people in the field, if they someday find a way to determine what is going on, if by chance there are such things as negative influences and negative entities, then I think we have to rethink whether or not these places should be accessible to the public, and maybe just left for people that are doing this particular type of research to further look into it and possibly even find some solutions to these situations. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope I can stay in contact with you. I will look into that.
Yes, please do. Thank you.
Outstanding, brother. Thanks for the call.
Thanks, Brent, as always.
Oh, of course, man. It's great to hear from you. Have a great night, brother.
You too, my friend. Take care. Aloha.
All right. And that is... I just, my head's reeling about the Bobby Mackey's thing. Is the Johanna story not true?
Yeah, Johanna, that never happened.
Really?
There was a dancer named Johanna that worked there. However, her timeline with the story or actually there was a lady named Johanna that committed suicide in the area, but she, her timeline just absolutely did not line up with any of that. I couldn't find anything on Johanna. I couldn't find anything definitive on Pearl Bryan. I couldn't even find anything really definitive about the slaughterhouse. There was a slaughterhouse in the area, as whether or not the drains that are in Mackey's are the ones that go out to the river. I don't know. Most of what's been propagated about Mackey's is just folklore, and a lot of it from Carl Lawson, who's a caretaker there and passed away. He's the one that dug up the floor and found the portal to hell. And I think people have brought enough of their fear and trepidation into the environment that they've created. Maybe a few bits of activity, just from their mind, and I believe that's a thing.
Yeah, I do.
So, yeah,
that's really cool. And so there is, and now on the last show, and you kind of went over it really quick as we were talking about Bobby Mackey's. You had mentioned that you'd seen the well that isn't really a well, and so that isn't a well in the basement. That hole.
No, that's not a well. The records don't really exist from the slaughterhouse that was there in the 1800s. So there's no real way to know if those holes, there's the portal to hell, the well room, if you will. And then there's another similar type of hole up under the floor towards the front of the building. You have to really get on your belly and do some low crawling to get back there, but there's something similar. It's kind of unclear as to whether those are remnant from the slaughterhouse. There was also a whiskey still that was across the road that used water from the Licking River there, and used big pipes to pull in. This has been way after the slaughterhouse, so couldn't find anything definitive.
That's really cool, and that's cool to hear because of course, as far as the sensationalizing of the location, those are the stories we all hear, and it's like, yeah, I'm sure that would be an absolute recipe for a portal for hell opening up if all that stuff had happened. But just by nature of it being tied to the mob, there's always that chance anyway, because of course they didn't hold on and gain power by being nice. So
no, they didn't, and there's still bullet holes and doors downstairs. I mean, if you ever get a chance, I highly encourage anyone who's interested, and even if you're not sure about getting into the paranormal, just to go experience the place and the history. It's really quite an amazing building. And if you're an investigator and you get to Bobby Mackey's, you'll pick up on a few things. The place has been built on and built on and built on and built on. The roofs are sagging, the floors are sagging. It's real easy to get the funhouse effect there. A lot of unshielded electrical, and there are giant power lines going over the front part of the property. So much that just walking under them on the street, you can get 8 to 10 milligauss sustained EMF. When you're up in Carl Lawson's old apartment, you can get 20 to 30 milligauss sustained. And if you sit in that for a while, your top of your scalp's going to start to tingle and you're going to feel a little weird.
Absolutely.
So there's lots of things going on there. And no doubt in my mind that if it's not paranormal, then we've figured out where magnetic soil, fault lines, and northern flowing river, kind of all that coming together must make for some kind of weird mind melding experience.
Well, I can't thank you enough for being on the show tonight, Dan. Thanks so much for coming back and sharing all of your knowledge and experience and information with us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, happy to come back anytime, guys.
All right, we're going to take you up on that too. And ladies and gentlemen, Dan will be working with me on some video projects that we will start getting out here as soon as we can, if I can nail him down on his busy schedule and his flights across the the face of the nation. But that about wraps up the show tonight. So thank you all for being here and being a part of the portal. And if you're listening on TFR, iHeart, TuneIn, TalkStream, stick around because Jimmy Jean Into the Microcosm is coming next. And it's always a fun show full of amazing layers and layers of entertainment. So stick around for that. Jimmy and Brandy will be coming up next.
And he's got Naysay tonight, too.
He's got Naysay, so it's a full house then. So we love you all. Be good to each other. Be kind. Take care of each other. And God bless you all. And we will see you on Wednesday night for our Wednesday live stream on YouTube. Take care, everybody.